This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome our next incredible guest, which is Valentina Jordan from Nauta, or Nauta. I'm going to let you pronounce your own company the way you wish to pronounce it, but welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so cool to have you along for the ride today. And you're based in the incredible city of Miami. We were talking off air about the fact that my wife and I love visiting Miami. We've got friends in Miami and Brickell and various other places around Miami. And man, it's an expensive city to live in. At least it seems like it would be a very expensive city to live in. But man, it's beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful, it's sunny, and I mean, we get everything. Good food, good people, and now a good tech scene.
Yeah, exactly. The tech scene is absolutely exploding in Miami for sure. Before we talk
Totally.
about what you guys do with your technology platform, logistics, it sounds like a very impressive technology that you and your team have built. But how did you get into this space in the first place? What's your background that sucked you into this wonderful world of
Yeah.
global commerce mixed with logistics and technology?
Yeah. Thanks so much for asking. So I'm actually newly adopted into the whole global supply chain and logistics. But since my co-founder, Rafa, brought me like a light into how the world works, I became deeply obsessed. I would like to tell people is I think we've been cheated since we're a child, first with Santa Claus and then with Amazon when things just magically appear in your doorstep. And then there's another world that doesn't even know how global supply chain and logistics work. And the beautiful how complex it is, honestly, really caught me. And personally, I think that you just don't know how the world works until you understand global supply chain. Got into it because of my co-founder. He had worked in the industry his whole life, and Nauta stems from his experience and his frustration and trying to really run global companies, importing and exporting from around the world. It's a global industry by nature. And yeah, started to solve his problems and then realized that it didn't only apply to him, but applied to companies in Japan, in Singapore, in the US, in Mexico, and Chile, and decided to build the technology for everyone.
Wow. And you rightly point out that most people, even people in the e-com space or the tech space, consultants, BAs, solution architects, we've been shortchanged too in terms of we oftentimes don't see logistics, whether it's internal logistics inside a company, owned warehousing, 3PLs, first mile, middle mile, last mile, system integrations, ERPs. We don't oftentimes see those things as sexy, but they are essential pieces of infrastructure. And for me, like when I started to get religion around logistics was when I was working inside of a brand as an e-com manager, and we had our own owned warehouse and internal logistics capabilities. And when we were replatforming our ERP, when we were platforming our WMS, when we were replatforming all of our hardware capabilities, our scan to pick and our directed pick capabilities, we implemented a brand new carousel to take stuff from the back of the warehouse to the front of the warehouse to the pick pack dispatch stations. Like when I went through all of that architecture and when we were doing search and select for our WMS and what capabilities it needed and lot-based tracking and batch-based tracking, and we had a small element of manufacturing within our business in addition to the distribution of our products. And like I always thought that stuff was a little bit boring until we had to do it and we had to re-architect our entire physical warehouse space. We implemented chaotic put away for the first time so that we could better utilize space within our warehouse. Like it was really super, super interesting. And you just can't get anything done in this world without super strong logistics capabilities backed by super amazing technology.
Totally. And you mentioned a couple of things here that I think are extremely interesting, and it's super volatile. Like people working in supply chain and logistics are the most resilient people that you can find because everything is managing exceptions. You don't know, you wake up and you have no clue what you're going to face that day. And it's extremely entertaining. And so I think sexy, it's subjective at the end of the day. And the more challenging, at least for us, the more sexier it is. And we also have to be very empathic, which these are people, again, that have been building it day in and day out to get everything that we eat, use, and buy readily available. And it's hard work. It's not only hard work, but it is chaotic and it's beautiful. I can't look back anymore.
Yeah, I think the word I would apply to anything to do with logistics and global supply chain is dynamic. That's probably the word
Totally.
I would totally use. And there's never a dull moment
Yeah.
in supply chain, as you point out. And you guys bill yourselves at Nauta as the AI native operating system for global supply chains. And so when you think about the perfect target market or target customer, ICP, of your technology, is it the merchants themselves? Is it the 3PLs? Is it the shipping
Yeah.
companies? Who do you target this sort of intelligence layer for logistics and supply chain? Who do you target your technology at?
Yeah, great question, Jason. So before I answer that, our framework to go into the whole supply chain logistics, which is it's a huge industry, is basically we divide it in three big buckets. The first bucket is the movement of goods. The second one is the movement of information. And then the third one is the movement of money. So when we started to analyze how we could start digitizing and using AI to simplify these day-to-day processes, we saw a huge opportunity in the movement of information, which at the end of the day links both sides of the spectrum, the movement of goods and the movement of money. And those who were seeing the full information and actually had access to it were the shippers. So when we talk about shippers, we're talking about traders, manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, or retailers. So companies who own the product, yet not always the supply chain or logistics is their core business. So if, let's say you're a manufacturer of toothpaste, right? So logistics is a means to an end. You need to be able to bring all of your raw materials in order to produce and manufacture toothpaste, yet it's still super chaotic and it's not your core business. So that's our ICP. Companies, again, that are moving these products. And we tend to target more of the mid to enterprise level clients where volumes are high enough to impact the logistic costs, to impact the whole PNL.
And so that you're saying like, okay, I'm a manufacturer, I'm a distributor, and I'm doing 500 million plus a year in revs. That's probably your sweet spot.
Yeah, correct. A billion up, 500 to a billion up. Yes.
Okay, amazing.
And the reason why it's because, again, the supply chain and the logistics it actually takes a toll in the overall business.
And I guess, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, when you're smaller than that, let's say you're a $100 million distributor, you oftentimes are dealing with like local freight brokers, you're dealing with international freight forwarders that kind of deal with all the pain on your behalf. And so you don't necessarily need, it's okay, here's a black box over here of stuff that we don't really, like, it's not our core business. We are not subject matter experts on this stuff. We're just prepared to pay someone a margin to think about all that, to deal with all that, to organize all the intermodal transport, to deal with all the bills of lading, we just expect them and their people and their technology to deal with all that crap for us. And so therefore, we don't necessarily need to adopt that technology internally because we don't have internal experts that deal with this stuff every day. And we just tell our freight forwarder, okay, cool, we need to get this stuff from this port to our warehouse here. You deal with all that. Is that kind of the thinking behind where they start to have enough internal capability to actually be able to adopt and use your technology?
No, look, in reality, even the enterprise level clients that we're working with work with freight forwarders or 3PLs and 4PLs. And it's normally a mix of both. Depending on the trade lanes, depending on the volumes that they move in, they might do it directly or they might use a freight forwarder. And this doesn't really solve their pain end to end because the freight forwarder is an intermediary. They're not the end paying. They're not feeling the pain all the way to the end. Still, you have the challenge. When it happens, what happens with the smaller importers is that the volume is not enough for it to be chaotic to manage, right? So if you're moving one container a week or two containers a week or two trailers, the information transfer and the work is not as heavy for you to actually need a technology. Now, this doesn't mean that it doesn't work for you. If you have a 2 to 3 person team or a 10-person team, of course, Nauta can automate all of your processes. That will take a ton of workload. However, we do see that it's more of a bleeding pain on the bigger companies because of the information overload and the amount of data that is being generated when you're moving large volumes of freight. We still have our client, again, work with freight forwarders, 3PLs, 4PLs, carriers, but they still need that leverage in terms of information to be able to make decisions. And even though there's a third party taking care of it, they still need it on their end to better manage inventory, to better manage their cash on cash, to better manage the whole day-to-day operation.
And I think there is a misunderstanding in the industry that we work in, which is commerce. And I explicitly work for the last 5 years. I've only worked with manufacturers and distributors from a merchant perspective. And so I've gone doubled and tripled down. After 25 years in e-commerce, I've doubled and tripled down on the B2B side of the industry. But even there is still a massive gap in knowledge and understanding around just how physical paper-based, and even with EDI and even with digital data interchange, there is still so much physical paper in the global logistics world. It's overwhelming and it's weird. It's weird. When I've had stuff delivered back when I was a merchant, we had cartons, pallets, and containers being delivered, etc. It's wild. It's not like the delivery driver of a container whips out his iPad when he drops something off. It's literally on a clipboard.
Physical.
There is a physical sheaf of paper, including the bills of lading, etc., that you then physically sign off on in triplicate, etc., etc. It is just wild how much paper. I don't know how many trees are consumed in the global logistics industry every year, but it is just insane to me how paper-based this industry still is. And I'm assuming you bill yourselves, you specifically say, Nauta connects, predicts, and automates every system unifying fragmented information. Is a mouthful, so I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. Information into a single intelligent network that delivers SKU-level insights for real-time decisions in global trade. Now, that's a mouthful and it's a little bit jargony, but assume that means that you're in your system at least creating digital twins of kind of everything, every physical good along that supply chain route. Is that kind of how you're trying to allow these businesses to visualize supply chains in a better way? When technology is just so dated in this industry, technology is old and it's really hard. Like many of these systems, they don't even have APIs. Like you're importing and exporting CSVs out of these shipping systems and shipping technologies, and they're emailing them to you as attachments with tracking details. It's just wild, isn't it?
It is. And let me reflect and walk you through how Nauta works, because I think that this will help understand everything. First, reacting to how manual it is, how paper-based it is, 100% agree. And I think there's certain reasons why this happens. The first one is trust is the name of the game. So there's still some sense of security of having a physical paper that it's telling you that you own that merchandise. So if you think about it, the bill of lading is the ownership, or as you would have for your house, of what is inside the container. So exactly. So there you go. I think there's a sense of security in having the physical paperwork. So even if you get it emailed, you get a bunch of our clients printing this documentation because they feel safe in having it in their hand. So I think that's super, super important. You're trusting third parties to move your business basically from point A to point B. So that's important. The second thing, and I would tend to disagree, is that yes, technology probably hasn't moved as fast as in other industries. However, they do have pretty robust tech stack. So most of these companies have a ERP, a TMS, a WMS, and OMS. And so the reality is that they are paying for technology. The opportunity that we see is that technology is not working for them. They are working for the technology. And the reason why this happens is because they are systems of record, not of transaction. And logistics is the most transactional industry that I've ever seen. Like you might have a piece of information that if you check back at it a couple hours later, is already obsolete because things have changed. So you need to be able to have, you said it better than me, that dynamism, that it's always changing, always evolving. So to have that real time and up to date, you need to be able to have systems that actually can keep up with it. And their existing tech stack can't do that. So it's not like they sometimes don't have it. It's just that what they have, it's not really useful for their use cases. And that's where we come in. So as you mentioned, it now as an AI native operating system for global shippers in the global supply chain and logistics. And what we do is that we give shippers control on an SKU level of their whole supply chain. Now, what does this mean? Think of Nauta as a membrane that sits on top of your ERP, TMS, WMS, OMS, and is extracting all the data from the systems, structuring it, contextualizing it, and then feeding it back in to their existing tech stack, but also generating agentic automations and predictive models so that data actually becomes actionable. And it doesn't sit just in data lakes and repositories that don't help you make the hundreds of decisions that you have to make as an operator in a day. So how does this look? We basically connect to their ERP, TMS, WMS, as well as their email. And our AI-powered system extracts and contextualizes all the data. And this is very important because, as you previously mentioned, you're receiving information from more than 12 stakeholders. So in order to normalize this, you need, before AI, you need a human to literally be saying, oh, okay, there's supplier A is asking for this, supplier B, I need to request that X, Y. It needs context. And it not only needs context on the industry, but it needs context on the company. Because not every importer or a shipper works the same way, right? That's what we do. We generated a context layer that is centralizing all this data, adapting it to the company behavior, and then has an agentic layer where we automate their day-to-day processes, which, as you mentioned, are chaotic, full of paperwork, and require a ton of interactions between different stakeholders. We are doing three things to summarize. Number one, we're augmenting their existing tech stack. We're not here to come in and rip and replace an ERP that has been around for more than a decade, and it probably took a couple of years to implement. We want the ERP to have the single source of truth. Second, which I just mentioned, is we're generating a single source of truth across the company. So you have the warehousing team, the procurement team, the logistics team, the finance team actually making decisions on the same information. That doesn't happen right now because since each of them are in their own system, it's very hard to do. And then the third is we're actually taking all the context from the operator and all this tribal knowledge to help them make decisions in a more efficient way. I'm a firm believer that human beings can make X amount of sharp decisions a day, and then you're tired, you're hungry, you're just overwhelmed, and it starts to become error prone. So that's where we come in.
As you well know, creating a new software category is hard, right? It's always easier to build something within an established, well-known software category. In an effort to try to contextualize what you do, based on what you just said, I might think of Nauta as a BI layer for logistics. That's what I like. If I was to contextualize it in software categories that I know of and that I've worked with software in those categories before, I think of business intelligence as being a really important thing, but oftentimes business intelligence internally doesn't necessarily extend into your supply chain, right? It looks at, okay, throughput, it looks at momentum, it looks at COGS, it looks at net margins, it looks at a whole bunch of other things, but it doesn't necessarily bring supply chain into that picture of building out. For example, I'm guessing that now if a shipment that's on the water, it had a target delivery date into port of X, now we get an update from the shipper. There's been a freaking storm, and therefore this shipment is going to be delayed into port by 2 days now, or 3 days, or 4 days, or whatever it is. Now I might, downstream of that, I may need to adjust the date when the truck is going to meet them at the port, to when the items are offloaded off the ship, to then on ship it to my DCs, for example. Or I may need to talk to the supplier, the manufacturer, the factory facility in China, or wherever it is, and I might need to say, okay, cool. Now, because this has been delayed, we now need to either pull forward or push back some of our manufacturing timelines for the next shipment of goods, or whatever it might be. And so I feel like these are these the types of scenarios where Nauta brings an intelligence layer into the business that is really difficult to get when you're trying to track information coming in from 50 different sources at the same time?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and you hit right on the nail on the use cases. What I would say is more than the BI layer, I think the BI layer is what we've been seeing for the last decade, which is a ton of visibility and data. But really, the data layer is a foundation for the actionability, right? So really, more than the BI layer is a system of action that helps you and recommends what's the right next step for you to take, given a specific scenario that you're facing. So for your example here, what Nauta does is we'll tell you, hey, this is going to be late, and you don't have enough stock. You're going to be below safety stock. Hence, XY products won't be able to be manufactured. Here are 3 other suppliers in your area that will make it on time and can be helpful in order so you don't have to stop your production line. It doesn't only show you the layer, it gives you recommendation, and it helps you take action and drafts what are the right next steps for you to take. A very easy example will be also like 10 years ago, we would be comfortable in the visibility layer of where's my container? And it'll tell you it's in Rotterdam. Now, that's really not enough. So what Nauta does is, hey, your container is stuck in Rotterdam. Here are the other options that you have in order for you to have your merchandise. Here's the other supplier. Here are some things that you can do in terms of shifting what you have in a dock in order to meet the product needs that you have. So for shippers, it's all about the product. And that's why inventory management, and for us, connecting supply chain with logistics is the key. And for us, is the holy grail.
And I guess it also extends into, I can almost think of this as a global WMS in some respects, in the sense that if we have a WMS that runs our owned warehouse, or maybe we have a WMS that we're getting data out of from a 3PL that we work with or something like that, and then we map that down into our ERP for the location level inventory that's coming from those third-party WMSs down to the bin level and all that sort of stuff. I think of this almost like a global WMS, in that if we think of ports, if we think of shipping containers, if we think of ships, if we think of factories, if we think of customs facilities, bond facilities, if we think of all of those locations as just more warehouse locations, they might be mobile, but we think of them as just more inventory locations that we may not be able to put our hands on immediately, the goods, to then get them to our customer. I think of the global supply chain as just an extension of our warehouse. And if we think of it like that, we expect radical transparency of our owned
Mhm.
warehouses. I want to know the bin. I want to know the location. I want to know the SKU. I want to know the lot. I want to know everything about the inventory that I have down in my warehouse, to where I can literally walk out to my warehouse and accurately put my hands on a single unit of a single SKU anytime that I want to. That's the only way to manage inventory accurately, correct? From the point of devanning to the point of put away to the point of outbound shipping out of my warehouse, I should know exactly. And that's why we have totes, for example. That's why from the time of scanning in an item, from the time we devan it to the time it lands on a shelf, there's maybe 5 barcode scans that happen in that process. It's because I want to know at all times exactly where my shit is. And I feel like that is something that you help these manufacturers and distributors, for example, extend that visibility into the global supply chain. And then, okay, cool. I know, not only do I know where it is, but I know what needs to happen to get it into my hands and get it into my customers' hands as well.
Totally. And you hit the nail on the head exactly there at the end. Is the actionability of the data is what's the most important thing for us, especially because really the underlying pain on where is this at and when will it make it is how will this affect my inventory, hence my ability to either fulfill a contract, ship products, or manufacture products. So really that's the underlying pain and the need of control visibility. And that's why the actionability on the data is extremely important, because it's a downstream of decisions that need to be made based on when things will be arriving. And a lot of times it's not even about the delays. Sometimes actually receiving it ahead of time is a pain for our customers. We have a client that their supplier started to send things 7 days in advance, and you would think, whoa, great, I'm going to be receiving the products, they're going to have the inventory on hand. But again, even these decisions have a downstream impact. Our AI started to flag that this was consistently happening. Hence, the impact on the client is inventory on hand that they can't store in their warehouses because it's arriving early. And second, it affects their cash on cash because they're having to be paying for these products even before they had it forecasted financially. So that's where the actionability comes in. And that's where the AI is monitoring patterns, but it's making them actionable in terms of negotiating with suppliers, making decisions in terms of warehousing space. So we're seeing a beautiful era of transitioning from visibility into actionability and helping businesses become more efficient, not only by cost savings, but actually generating additional revenue, because hitting on spot inventory management is additional revenue for these companies. And that's where we think that AI actually adds value in their day to day.
And you raise a really key point here, which is that in distributors and the way that they do business with their dealers or their OEMs or whoever it is that they're supplying to, this is a consistent challenge in terms of shipment visibility, delivery date expectations, tracking details, etc. This is something that I am consistently seeing over and over again. So when I go in and I work with a distributor for the first time, oftentimes I'll be leading interviews. If they haven't done much customer research in a while or ever, then I will oftentimes go in and I will be interviewing their customers on their behalf. And oftentimes I will specifically request that they not be in the room or the virtual room when I'm doing those interviews, that the customer can be brutally and transparently honest
Open.
about what's great about the supplier, but what's maybe not so great about the supplier. They could be much more open if Bob, their account manager, is not on the call and they don't have to go work with this poor guy the next day and maintain a relationship. And you would be shocked, or maybe you wouldn't be shocked because you work in this industry, when we talk about all these new e-commerce initiatives or digital portal initiatives, being able to lodge digital quote requests or digital RMA requests or check pricing, check inventory, check MOQs, all this sort of stuff. You'd be shocked that what we would perceive as maybe the sexier stuff oftentimes is displaced by, actually, I would just be happy to know when my parcel was going to arrive. Because in the distribution world, we're not shipping like satchels. We're shipping cartons, pallets, and containers. And oftentimes it's an LTL shipment. And the reality is that what they say on the receiving side, they're going, and I had a client of mine who said, look, I've been doing business with the supplier for 15 years. Apart from the times when I email or call my account manager, I have never, ever known when a shipment is going to arrive in my receiving dock. Now, that's a problem because we order 20 and 40-foot shipping containers from this supplier. And when the shipment arrives, it ties up a spot on our receiving dock until we can get to it, until we can devan it, and until we can put it away. And I need to schedule my warehouse teams and my receiving teams to be able to do that. And not only does it take up space until I can get to it, but it delays the time that I can actually get it into my customers' hands as a result. And on the supply side, the distribution side, they say, we just don't have that. We would love to surface that information to you, but unless it's on a specific query by query basis with the shipping company or the freight forward or whatever it is, we don't actually have that information to give to you. So it's a catch-22. The supplier wants that information. The buyer wants that information, but nobody seems to be able to connect those dots.
Totally. And that's where the data comes in. If you recall at the beginning of the conversation, we mentioned that our framework to solve technologically for the industry's movement of goods, movement of data, and movement of money. And the movement of data, as I mentioned, connects both ends, the movement of goods and the movement of money, right? Because you need to be able, depending on the movement of data, you know when to, depending on the movements of goods, you understand, etc. So all of this to say that what's the link that is missing between them both is the movement of data, that it's giving them not only the visibility, but the actionability to be able to plan ahead and be able to run their business as efficient as possible. Because to your example, if they're already at the receiving dock and they didn't have enough personnel, then they're probably gonna have to pay extra hours, which costs them more, or then they won't have space to offload their merchandise, so they're gonna end up paying penalties to the maritime line when they run out of free time. Downstream effects that what's missing, the link, is the information. And the reality, Jason, is that the information is out there. The challenge is it's completely fragmented. So timestamps, data statuses, they all are living in completely unstructured format. And that's where we come in. We've created this data ontology layer that is basically connecting, synthesizing, contextualizing, and structuring so that the shipper or importer can work better with their suppliers, but also can work better with their freight forwarders, with their brokers. So for us, that's why the data is the magic link, that it's there. It's not that it wasn't, it's just that it's so unstructured and analog that it's been so challenging to be able to do it. And so that doesn't only happen between the shipper and their suppliers or their service providers, but it is actually happening inside the shipper, right? Because the procurement team might have an order required date for a specific product, but then the warehousing team or the logistics team can't control that, or is not aware if they'll be able to make it on time. So they're both acting up on different truth that is no benefit for the company. So that's where Nauta comes in. It's linking all the information, it's structuring it, it's actually making it valuable. So the agentic layer on top, we run on 18 agents, actually help make that information actionable for our clients. So 100% agree. And I think that the industry is ready for the change. We talked about the comfort of having the physical paper, but they're also ready to have more control, to not be so manual, to not have to be on fight or flight mode 24/7. Look, our clients are working through Christmas, through New Year's, right? It's the industry that never sleeps. And so they're in for a change, and we're seeing beautiful signaling on adoption, beautiful signaling on companies wanting to really invest in making it not only more efficient, but helping their teams make better decisions on a day-to-day basis.
And I also guess that things like tariffs, and I guess there's been this refocusing on global logistics. I think really, from my view, the first catalyst of this and the willingness to re-look at the entire way global supply chains works was COVID, right? That was the first time
That
that
was
I
a
really
turning
saw
point.
the industry being willing to go, this shit doesn't work. This just-in-time model doesn't work. This lack of visibility up and down the supply chain doesn't work. I've even seen it in the point of distributors being willing to share inventory data upstream to their manufacturing suppliers. I've seen them being willing to share inventory data downstream to their dealers and buyers, and vice versa upstream. That didn't happen pre-COVID. That never happened. They looked at inventory data as part of their secret sauce, as part of their commercially sensitive information. But what they realized, especially post-COVID, is, hey, if I'm a little bit more transparent about my inventory, if I'm a little bit more transparent about my min-max levels at the SKU level, if I'm more transparent up and down the supply chain, then we all benefit from that transparency. And hey, as of 2026, that's really not secret sauce anymore. Like, the amount of widget X that I have in warehouse A it's not that commercially sensitive. And if I'm willing to be a little bit more transparent with the supplier and they're willing to be a little bit more transparent with me, then we can all make much, much better planning decisions that ultimately lead to a better end customer experience. And then obviously the tariff war has increased the need for transparency even further. And is that really because you guys have been running, I think, for about 2 years now, is that really when you saw the tide starting to turn in terms of willingness for the supply chain to be more transparent?
Yeah, so we've been running for a year. We launched on January 7th, and how much the industry has changed even since then, it's crazy. But I 100% with you, Jason. The tipping point for the industry was COVID, when people realized that there was no paper towels or toilet paper in the store, and they're like, what's going on? How important the supply chain and logistics is for the world. And that's when we started to become more sensitive about costs, about timing, and three things happened from there. The first one is logistics teams started to get seat in the table, especially in C-suites of companies, and conversations started to shift. The second thing that started to happen was that we started to get, as you mentioned, more tense volatility, especially in this new administration, where we don't even know what to expect. So planning becomes more crucial. You need to understand, you need to be thinking more than a month ahead or 2 or 3 months ahead. You need to be better at forecasting. You need to be better at planning your resources and planning everything. And then the third one started to become is how we like to cut it is that cash started to become more of a silent killer, because if you don't have your cash readily available to be able to negotiate or to be able to achieve the right payment terms, it's very hard for these companies to survive. So it was definitely a tipping point, and we started to see then the cherry on the cake was that AI started to become more accessible and more implementable in these types of companies. Yes, these things started to happen, and there's more awareness on as you mentioned, having information need to be shared is extremely important. But more than the information need to be shared, companies start to be more aware that their employees start to retire, right? So that information was retiring with their
With them.
employees. So they didn't start to, exactly. So if they didn't share transparently, they were going to lose it. So you act on volatility, you act on people retiring, you act on if terrorists coming up, you act on fleet costs going up. You need to do something about it that results again in C-levels having a seat in the table, and so more willingness to implement strategies and technologies on an area that used to be seen as a cost center and now has the potential of becoming a revenue generation area. So for us, that's the tipping point, and we see supply chain and logistics as a revenue generation potential for our client. And that's how we implement our technology. We always approach it from, hey, let me help you first, reduce costs on things that we can do really fast, between 30 to 45 days. But then how can it come in with Nauta to help you generate additional revenue? And that can be how we do it is through fill rate. So better management of inventory, helping them not have overstock or stock out. So yeah, COVID was hard. The pandemic was hard, but I guess for supply chain, it was the necessary tipping point.
And I guess one other catalyst is, especially in manufacturing and distribution, is lots of old people aging out. And so we now, at least according to Forrester, at the end of 2024, over 70% of the buyers in the B2B world are now millennials and Gen Z. So the reality is that the buying side of the equation has matured, but the selling side of the equation hasn't always matured. But we got people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience in an industry, in a vertical, aging out within the next 2 to 5 years. And so all these people coming into the industry, including logistics, are digital natives. And so they come in and they go, why the hell are we still doing it this way when we should be using technology to make this more repeatable, more scalable, more accurate, more dependable, all that sort of stuff? And how can we increase global trust through technology instead of more paper? That's how they see the world. And I also
100%.
think that not only do we have millennials and Gen Z entering the industry at an unprecedented rate, but we have an expectation that technology will serve us, and technology, especially with AI, there's pretty high expectations on AI. I think a lot of it's unfulfilled yet. We're getting there. And do you think of yourself partially as a demand planning and forecasting platform too? Do you take over, like most manufacturers and distributors will have demand planning either in their ERP, or they'll have a standalone demand planning platform, and they'll be taking into account weather and all sorts of third-party data sources and all sorts of other things. Oftentimes, what is not in the demand planning platform is the type of data that you aggregate. So do you think of yourself as supplementary to the demand planning process, or completely being able to own that full stop?
Yeah, and I'll react to this in two parts. And first, to something that you mentioned earlier. And yes, most people are retiring, and the ones that are coming in are more tech savvy and more tech native. But there's something here that people are not speaking enough about, and is that the people retiring are taking knowledge with them that is not written down in contracts, that is not written down in processes, that they just acquired with 20 to 30 years of being in the company. And we don't want to lose that, because that's what I would say is the secret sauce of the companies nowadays. Not so much their inventory levels, as you were mentioning before. So what we do at Nauta is we help capture that context and that know-how through AI to be able to mitigate that potential risk that these companies are facing. So that's something that is very dear to our hearts. We work with the operators to augment them, to help them capture all these contexts instead of trying to replace them, because they have something in them that artificial intelligence still cannot fully replace. So that's our approach to this. And to the second part of your question, which was on demand planning, um, we don't view necessarily ourselves as a demand planning tool, yet we do have very strong demand planning capabilities. And the reason why is because we're connecting, again, from the SKU level all the way to the warehouse. So we're not only based on predictive analytic models, but we actually have the hard facts of what's going on. So that data connectivity allows for a ton of precision. We are very keen in a company on building predictive models, and that's what we have a big data team and machine learning team do this consistently, because having that visibility, that predictability, that actionability is key to our clients. And the reason why is because the average Fortune 500 importer is only hitting 85 to 90% of their fill rate. So that 10 or 15 and 10% of difference means billions of dollars, right? For us, being able to help them generate this additional revenue is key. So we either help them, our technology, again, does the demand planning functionalities, but we can also connect to their demand planning tool and augment that system through more precise data.
Amazing, amazing. I almost think of, yeah, I hate to call your tool an iPaaS platform, but it definitely has elements of being an iPaaS, because it is the traffic cop of a tremendous amount of data connected to many disparate systems. And is that one of the benefits that your clients get when they deploy Nauta, is the fact that you have existing out-of-the-box integrations with, I don't know, maybe most of the freight forwarding systems out there, most of the freight brokerage systems out there, connections to the major international shippers like Maersk and all the big boys and girls out there. Is that one of the benefits that your clients get, is that instead of every connection needing to be bespoke, you come to the table with a whole lot of these connections already in place, out of the box, ready to deploy tomorrow across and FedEx and DHL and all these international carriers? It feels like that would be a significant benefit, because it just makes it so much easier to deploy that versus trying to custom integrate my ERP with all of these traditional endpoints that I work with every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly as you're saying, that's part of our value prop and how we help our clients. their ERP is something that we do for them as well. And it's the heart and the lungs of the company. We do the heavy lifting. We have a big team that is taking care of it. But exactly. And the underlying value there is that that data is structured because agentic solutions won't add value. And going back to your point that there's still a lot of value to be delivered and expectations to be delivered from artificial intelligence, it's because the data layer is not there yet. So it's almost like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If the LLM is consuming data that it's not structured or it doesn't make sense, it's impossible for it to add value and precision and actionability on their day-to-day work. So that's where we come in. We help companies become AI ready. And how we do that is helping them implement the processes. We're firm believers and you can't take any, like both sides of the pendulum. You can't come in and change all the processes that they run. And you can't come in and just leave processes right as they are. You need to help them be more efficient, but we also help them structure all their underlying systems data, plus integrated to all of their supply providers. So you hit right now on the head. It's about both things, having the connections already in place, but also helping them have that data ready so that the agentic layer adds some value.
Makes complete sense. And is there anything that your customers, because you work with manufacturers, distributors, D2C brands, like you work with a wide range of brands and suppliers throughout the supply chain. Is there anything they are asking you to do today that you don't yet do, that you say, we don't do it today, but in 6 months we will be? Or is there any additional gaps in the market that you've already spotted that you go, look, we don't have this capability today, but we see this as a massive market opportunity. So over the next 6, 12, 18 months, these are the areas we're going to be focusing on?
Yeah, 100%. So there's anything is possible after implementing Nauta because we already have your data layer. So think about it. I'm already seeing when your purchase order is created, your invoicing, your payment terms, how much inventory you have. So I already have the visibility of your company across the board. It's like I have the MRI and I'm completely always feeding it back. So how we work with our clients is that we choose an area, which is normally logistics, and start to transform the business from logistics to both sides or the adjacent departments. So we start with logistics and then we can go into procurement, or we normally start with logistics and go into warehousing. The beauty of this is that once you have the data layer, applying automations and agentic solutions to the adjacent departments is extremely easy because we already have the foundation and it just becomes a personalization layer that, again, AI makes it more accessible than what it was before. So that's how we work, and we're able to basically adjust on a case by case without having to completely personalize the whole product. Now, to your question of what we're seeing in opportunities, definitely what we're working on right now is all of the payments and financial solutions for these clients. They are coming to us saying, hey, can you help us make it more efficient? On average, for a single dollar order, you're making between 10 to 20 payments. It highly depends, but it's a ton of payments. And this is completely fragmented in different systems, in different currencies. So there's a huge opportunity there. And that's what we're already working on for this year for our clients.
Yeah, pro forma invoicing is a big, complex, hairy thing in the B2B world for
Yes.
sure, and the timings and dates of that. Now, do you think of yourself primarily as an inbound logistics management engine, or am I going to also be like, let's say I have an owned DC in Kansas, in the United States, and I'm shipping out to dealers, or if I'm a manufacturer, I'm shipping out to my distributors. Are you then also tracking outbound shipments out of owned infrastructure so that you do get that full picture of, okay, cool, now we know, not only do we know when we shipped it out of our facility, but we know when it actually made it into our customers' hands, and we can track on-time performance and all those other metrics that are really important in the global supply chain? Or do you think of yourselves primarily as an inbound logistics platform?
Yeah. So we started primarily with inbound. That is a cup of tea, and it's where we're great at. But as we build integrations, we're able to give that last mile, let's call it that way, to our clients. So we started with OTIF, OTAM in full, and now we can, as you mentioned, jump into the next portion. Normally, how this happens is depending on the client, they're either ship with their internal resources or work with a specific carrier. If we don't have that integration, we'll build it for them. But if you think about it, it's all data. It's data coming in and it's data coming out. So that's our jam. So when you think about Nauta, you should think about your data flow, orchestration, and action layer that is helping you have end-to-end, not only visibility, but actionable.
But I guess the key also is that it's not just internal visibility. This is visibility that's useful to your customers. Going back to that example I was talking about before, if you don't have the data, no matter how much you want to give autonomy into your customers' hands and the planning ability and visibility into your customers' hands, if you don't have that data and you can't present it in a meaningful way to them and the way that they want to see that data and into the systems that they want to connect to, then it is sure operationally it might make you more efficient, and operationally it might make you better than your competitors, but also there is a heavy customer facing piece to this that I think should not be
100%.
overlooked.
100%. And that's where customer service comes in. And you have all these teams, huge teams taking care of these exemptions to be able to give us support. So that's another portion where we're seeing potential to expand, is helping with all this centralized data. The way to make it actionable is, as you mentioned, operational efficiencies, but also customer support. So that's another area that we've been exploring, but it's taking beyond visibility, it's taking it to actionability. And so that's honestly our sweet spot, is capturing, structuring data, becoming it readily available and usable, and then taking it the next step, which is actionable, not just leave it on a dashboard, not just leave it on a report. What can I do with the data? How will this help my business? And how can I not only reduce costs, but generate additional revenue?
And if you had some fairy dust and you could sprinkle it on the global logistics industry and you could change one thing about it at the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
Oof, that's a hard question over there. Look, I deeply respect industries that are complex, and I think it's very responsible to try and change something immediately because it works. It's chaotic, it's analog, but it works. We're receiving stuff. So we need to respect and recognize that. More than changing something, I would install the idea on leadership teams that transformation and change is uncomfortable, but we need to take the leap of faith. And it is working with partners that are there to actually help you transform. And that's why we're building for shippers, because we have no conflict of interest, right? With their providers, we're working for them, and we are that partner that wants to see a change. So I think change management is key for AI to work. And it's not necessarily doing crazy stuff. It's just having the true champion on board to help teams transition things. I think it's weird times for all of us. We're seeing a digital revolution and we're changing our behaviors. And so it's all about that for me. And I would install that idea.
I love it. I love it. Now, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile and to the Nauta website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to learn more, what's the best way to get a hold of you and talk all things international logistics and supply chain?
Yeah, you can shoot me an email at valentina@nauta.com or reach out to the team directly, and we're happy to talk.
Amazing. Amazing. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, now I get to flip the script. I get to turn the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Valentina Jordan from Nauta, what is your question for me today?
Ooh, I love this. What has been the craziest thing that you've seen in a warehouse happen?
Sorry, the craziest thing that I've seen.
That you've seen in a warehouse or in a distribution center, in
Look,
e-commerce?
it is warehouses are wild. And one of the things that, so many years ago, I worked with a company who they were a value added light manufacturer. And so what they did is they were a retailer, but they also personalized products. And what they did is for a lot of their products, like if they were selling Dora the Explorer backpacks, then they would embroider the kid's name on it. Or if they were selling a Christmas bauble that was a Mickey Mouse Christmas bauble, because so they owned the rights to distribute a lot of branded product like that. They had the license, the exclusive license to use Dora and Mickey Mouse and all this sort of stuff. And like if it was a Christmas bauble, maybe they would laser etch the person's name on it, for example, or whatever it might be. And that was the first time I had ever seen the light manufacturing process in the context of a massive warehouse distribution environment. So the order workflow was totally weird in the sense that it wasn't just, okay, cool, I took an order through Shopify and it flowed into my WMS and cool, here the shipment went out and then we got the data back into the OMS and back into the ERP and then the tracking went to the customer. It was far more complex than that. And they had different machines that did different things. And so based on the SKU, we had to develop integration routing for that order to almost be You could think of it almost like a marketplace order through an Amazon, where it had to, all the order data down to the SKU level had to be routed to the different light manufacturing machines and then rejoined back together at the end of the entire light manufacturing cycle for that order. If it had 5 items in the order, maybe it had to go to 5 different machines, and then had to be rejoined at the pick, pack, dispatch stage is where the order was rejoined together for actual shipment. And that was, I had never seen that before in my life. And I know that obviously that happens in China and it happens, but this was happening in Australia and New Zealand. And so it was the first time that I really started to understand, sure, it's relatively easy to move cartons around and with forklifts and everything else, but whenever you have anything that has to happen to a good as it flows through the supply chain before it actually gets into the customer's hands, the level of complexity and the number of sheer systems involved is pretty wild.
Crazy. And then now that you're part of the Nauta family, I'll give you the question that we get everyone on their onboarding. If you're stuck in a vessel in open waters, what would be the one song that you would listen on repeat? You're stuck inside a 40-foot container, right? Only one song on repeat. What song would you listen to?
Wow, it would definitely be something by Journey's my favorite band of all time. I don't know, it might be Lights. It might be, yeah, it would definitely be something by Journey. I'd have to think a little bit more about the perfect Lost at Sea track, but it would definitely be something by Journey.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Jason, for your time.
My pleasure. It was fantastic speaking with you, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.